full coverage insurance, you qualify for up to $150 cash back for your broken windshield. Auto Glass America will install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Wherever you are, Auto Glass America comes to you with free mobile service. Make your money go farther with Auto Glass America. 813-96-GLASS. That's 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you live across radio, podcast, and video stream as we're coming to you across Central Florida. We're soaring high around Radioland in the Florida Sunshine State, the new home of, I guess, the new headquarters for all liberty, apparently, as this country has gone through quite a tizzy, as groupthink has tried to supplant rational thinking, and scientism has tried to supplant science. We, in Florida, continue to enjoy a little bit more closer to home the way liberty should be, which is that it's not negotiable. And you should not create some kind of emergency powers to destroy people's ability to do business, people's ability to get on with life, go to church, worship as they see fit. These are things that are not to be negotiated. And yet so many people have surrendered those principles this entire year and a half or so. So that's what Florida is all about. That's what A Neighbor's Choice is all about. It's all about being entrepreneurial, being pro-startup, not focusing on politics as our primary means of understanding the world, but rather looking closer to home in our neighborhoods, looking to see what we can do together to make the world a better place by putting our skin in the game to serve our neighbor, whether that's a good or a service that we can provide better than anybody else, or whether that's an idea or an invention, whatever it is, we have lots of work to do. And the media wants us to just be compliant and be completely submissive and trusting of any giant pharmaceutical company, even though we know that CNN and ABC and CBS and NBC and the AP have written countless stories about these big pharmaceutical companies having all kinds of criminal malfeasance in the past. Now they want us to forget that they ever wrote those stories or ever reported on those different videos and act like, no. You have no choice but to surrender your health and your human sovereignty over to experimental drugs. You don't have to do that. You see, that you don't have to do that. But that requires people to have independence of thought. Now, we are not pro or anti. Whatever you want to do, you do you. But you do not have to go along with people trying to gaslight you into believing that there's only one solution, there's only one prescription that your body must have, or else you will not have access to human life. That is ridiculous. That is unethical. That is not how you do science or medicine, and you should not allow anybody to bully you into doing something that you don't want to do. It's your body, it's your choice, and you have a right to take care of your body the way you see fit. Don't let any nonsense peddler, garbage, fake news, science, quack tell you anything else, because they don't have all the facts. They don't even understand the problem with seed oils. Think about these ridiculous reporters, these so-called journalists that don't tell you anything about what vegetable oils or seed oils, same thing, are doing to our bodies when we eat them at the rates that we're eating them because of government subsidies in our food supply. The corn oil, the soybean oil, canola oil, peanut oil, right? All these different oils, palm oil, are, if you eat them at the rates that we do, they have a linoleic acid amount in them that causes chronic illnesses to develop over time. It causes mitochondrial dysfunction. It causes DNA mutation. We don't want those things to be in our body. Nobody sits there and tries butter and then tries the vegetable oil and says, hey, I'd rather have vegetable oil for this dish or whatever. No. You know, real fats, the fats that our ancestors ate and lived to be 100 or so, those fats are more delicious than the industrial seed oils that government has subsidized into our food supply at our expense, financially and physically. And yet, so nobody's going to miss removing these things out of our bodies. You know, it's like trying to tell people to get away from sugar. Now, some people have a sweet tooth, right? And it's hard to get people to move away from carbs and sugar sometimes, but nobody's going to miss the biggest elephant in the room in terms of our nutritional decline, which is the consumption of the amount of vegetable oils that we're eating thanks to Uncle Sam. Single-payer healthcare will not fix what single-payer nutrition science broke, which is our health. And we have to be able to think outside of the corporate press. Think about it. The same investors that own these giant TV and sometimes radio networks are the same folks that have an investment in pharmaceutical companies and have an investment in seed oil companies. And they don't want people to rock the boat. They don't want people to challenge their corporate interests. And NBC and all these companies should have a disclaimer spelling out whenever they talk about something that we have a conflict of interest here to report on this story honestly, because we have a lot of financial ties and sponsor dollars from this company or this industry. So we're going to let you know about that as we report. They don't do that. They should. If they were journalists, they would, but they're not journalists. They're PR spokespeople for special interest corporations that brand themselves as a news outlet. It's a very interesting concept, right? You can just be a PR firm and get away with a bunch of nonsense if you brand yourself as a news agency. But in fact, out of the old TV party media outlets, all they want to do is talk about what's in their interest for their special interests that provide all the different donations. Donations basically amount to the sponsorship ads that they pay for. That's what I'm talking about. And again, we have tried to on this program remind people of all the different news stories that the old TV party media outlets have reported on about criminal malfeasance from pharmaceutical companies. But but for some people who watch TV party news outlets for all their information, it's just whatever today is the story, they just accept it. It's like they forgot all the reporting that CNN and NBC and CBS and ABC have done about Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson and other companies having some questionable behavior in the past. Malfeasance, lawsuits, corporate criminal settlements with the federal government, as if that that doesn't have anything to do with our current context. We can't have that as a certain bit of context for some of the behavior of these corporations in the past, just to have that available to us. No. We're supposed to act like everything is 100%, take it to the bank. Not a single iota of doubt should ever be placed. This is not science. This is not that's not democracy. That's not having the will of the people, where you're not allowed to have a dissenting opinion. You can't even get information out. The media corporations that dominate TV because of government regulations and interventions in the market, they don't facilitate a healthy debate. And neither does the social media websites. So where do you get the voice? Where do you actually have a debate? Where do you actually have any discourse? You have to go around the margins, right? You have to go into alternative voices. And that's a sad decline of a society that's supposed to be about the public will, supposed to be about protections for liberty, the right to free speech, the right to health freedom, and scientific debate. You cannot have science without discourse, without debate. And if everybody wants to just lie about science en masse, and say that it's all about coercion and strong arming people into accepting one position and not having any skepticism, that's not science. And a society that doesn't have science does not have the ability to move forward. The true spirit of science is one in which you are able to question the foundational dogmas of the world in which you inhabit. Without Galileo questioning the established dogma of his time, we wouldn't have the science that we have today. Without having other folks, Nikola Tesla, questioning the wisdom of using DC, direct current electricity to power the grid, we wouldn't have the AC paradigm that we have today. Without folks deciding that they could make a flying machine like the Wright brothers, when people were laughing at them, we wouldn't have the airplanes that we take for granted today. You see, so much of everything that you take for granted as just standard operating procedure, context of your daily life is only here because of bold, visionary thinkers who at the time of their work were derided and treated, marginalized, and treated as, anti-science or ridiculous or outlandish. You see? And if you snuff that out, if you snuff that spirit of scientific inquiry out of a culture, there is no ability for it to move beyond its current, status quo, its current quagmire, its current moment of passivity and resigning itself to politics. I mean, that's what the media tells us to do. Everything we want, we have to achieve by giving the state more power. That doesn't sound like science. That sounds like some kind of political ideology. And our country needs to have inventors and innovators and dissidents and misfits and contrarians. They need to be able to have a voice. That is what America is all about. The left and the right both need this. This is not something about partisanship. We should not allow folks to try to squelch and destroy robust disagreement. That's the foundation of a healthy society, not just for science, but for all of society's questions in the world of culture, religion, and so forth. So let us hope that you and I and our broadcast today can be just one more attempt at moving the ball forward and opening up a new spirit of debate, a renaissance of creativity and thinking outside the box, because that is the heart and soul of what it means to be an American. I'm David Gronowski. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We'll take a break and return in just a moment. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host here. As we look at the news and also comments, we saw a tweet by a guy named Daniel Kotzen. He says, maybe Joe Rogan can't say it, but I can. If you are young and healthy, you don't need a COVID vaccine. By refusing an experimental drug, you are not propagating the outbreak. You are exercising a fundamental human right, the right to bodily integrity. Your body, your choice. And, I think that is a perspective that we need to keep in mind as something that can be part of the conversation. Especially when, again, these things were rushed, and when Donald Trump was the guy pushing them, the television and Kamala Harris was telling us maybe we should be a little skeptical, but now that they won, we're supposed to just forget that. This is not critical thinking. If you rush something and you don't have legal immunity, and it's a new type of product, never been done before, then why are you gaslighting people who are young and healthy, who say, you know what, I just want to wait and see? You can't have that opinion anymore? Is that not, human? See, people want to treat human beings like cattle, like they don't have an opinion, like they're just fodder for whatever grand plan, central planner idea someone wants to cook up with enough political and capital power. But that's not what human beings are. We're not fodder. We're not meant to be expendable. Isn't that a novel idea, that we're not meant to be expendable? Is that the case? Because it sure sounds like it. It sure sounds like that's become a quaint, novel idea, that human beings are not to be treated as expendable, as just, you don't have a choice. You go along with what we tell you, or else you're an enemy. That's not the way human adults talk. That's how barbaric brutes talk. That's how uncivilized, unsophisticated people talk. It's my way or the highway. But that's exactly what the corporate press talks like. If you're not on board with perpetual war, then they want to say that you're against the troops, right? They'll make up something like that. If you're not on board with ridiculous, fake green energy scams by giant corporations that are not producing clean energy, if you're not on board with that, then you hate the planet. See how they want to box you into everything. If you're not on board with Hollywood, values, then you're not allowed to have an opinion. You're a monster. If you're not on board with allowing, government to have yet another excuse to go after nonviolent people, they've already got the drug war. And now Biden wants to expand that drug war by criminalizing, menthol cigarettes, which is going to create another lucrative black market for gangs to sell products and for folks who still want to sell these cigarettes to to meet consumer demand, they're going to be in harm's way of having a deadly drug war come after them. If you're not on board with that, then the media wants to vilify you. If you're not on board with, the bailouts, corporate welfare, experiments with universal basic income, if you're not on board with that stuff, you're going to be marginalized. If you're not on board surveillance of your neighbors, then you're supposed to be hated. If you're not on board putting kids with a mask and keeping them away from healthy interactions with their friends, keeping them in the house where they're supposed to do school on Zoom for 8 hours and social isolation, if you're not on board with that, then they're going to try to marginalize you. If you're not on board monopoly education, one size fits all, cookie cutter, goop type education, if you want school choice, they'll want to marginalize you. They don't, for some reason, the corporate press does not want to allow a healthy, robust spirit of debate. And that only lets us know that they should not be taken seriously when they present us with reports. You should be very suspicious of people who do not want to allow you to have a disagreement. If they don't want you to disagree, it may be that they're not acting in good faith with all the ideas that they present as objective fact, that perhaps they have a religious zeal to convert you to their particular worship of an all-powerful, centralized state conception that they have in their head. Human beings, since the dawn of time, have always wanted to worship something. Don't ever let people pretend that they've somehow transcended that worship desire. And the folks that run these giant corporations that are fading ever so fast in their relevance and their ratings, they have a religious zeal for a nanny state. They just believe that that is the pinnacle of human achievement, to centrally plan out everybody's lives, to have a nice hierarchy that they get to be at the top of because they have the right holiness codes and speech codes and they have the right language and all that stuff. But they have this huge animating desire every day to create a centrally planned, all-powerful state with all kinds of coordination around the globe and what have you. And they really want it. They believe in it. It's their messianic zeal. They believe that a government that can plan out what you can eat. Remember Bill Gates? They want to eliminate. He said all these Western countries or rich countries should eliminate their consumption of beef 100%. These folk, he wants to, pour dust into the sky to blot out the sun. And these people act like they're God and that you're barely even registering on the scale of humanity because they don't care about your perspective. Bill Gates doesn't really care if you say, hey, I don't want you to put a thick canopy of dust into the atmosphere for some kind of experiment. Okay? He doesn't care. He's like, who are you? I have money. Therefore, I'm more powerful. That's the way these corporate bigots actually think. Otherwise, why would they do what they're doing? Why wouldn't he go and get consent from every single human being on the planet before he ever dared doing something so ridiculous? It's because he has a religion. He worships state and corporate alliance power. And he thinks because he's got money, he's better than you, and he can do whatever he wants with your son and your access to it. Well, that's ridiculous. We know that's ridiculous. We know that's bigoted. It doesn't matter what the TV tries to do to market that to us. We know that it's a bunch of nonsense. A Neighbor's Choice will return. I'm David Gronowski. Back in just a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on.
Yes.
The madness of 2020.
No.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going off.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States. And
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point.
You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show, weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040, WHBO.
President Biden announced he is lifting the cap on the number of refugees allowed into the U.S. to 62,500 for the fiscal year. This comes a few weeks after he was sharply criticized by Democrats for delaying a promised increase from the Trump-era cap of 15,000. Earlier today in Norfolk, Virginia, the president was promoting his $1.8 trillion plan to invest in childcare and education. Plan includes 2 years of tuition-free community college.
An awful lot of folks who even get an opportunity to go to community college still can't get there because of food, transportation, and those other costs. And so we're going to increase Pell Grants.
General Mark Milley, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says he's open to considering an independent body to decide whether sexual assault accusations in the military should be prosecuted. And restrictions on travel to the U.S. from India take effect tomorrow as India deals with one of the world's worst coronavirus surges. Brian Clark, ABC News.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski, as we continue live on radio, looking at the news headlines, looking at the conversations we need to be having and trying to foster them together. That's what you've come to expect. You can always drop us an email at hello@aneighborschoice.com. That's hello@aneighborschoice.com. Also go there for all of our content. We have a film series called Things Hidden. We have our Things Hidden podcast, and we have exclusive essays on our website at aneighborschoice.com. You don't want to miss it. Of course, all of our radio broadcasts, including this one, will be available, as always, on aneighborschoice.com. Let's look at some of the comments on our YouTube live stream where you can interact with the show by asking a question, making a comment. We'll try to get to some of them as we continue. Commenter AD says, throughout the pandemic, the priesthood of science has tried to keep the public disoriented. They use/hide data as if it was medieval Latin that peasants weren't literate to interpret. And it's not just that field, you see. It's in the field of physics. We've talked about this on our program on Science and You, where you get, it's just human nature, I guess, when you have a monopoly of funding. Government is a monopoly on the use of force. George Washington described it as such. Others have agreed. And using a monopoly on force and then pouring all of that monopoly to be kind of like the go-to place for funding in science will distort the scientific spirit, because monopolies aren't compatible with scientific dissent. You see how it works? So here's the equation. Government that's big enough to monopolize funding of science in any field, whether it's virology, like Dr. Fauci monopolizes in that field. Nobody's allowed to dissent from his perspective of whether we should be even researching and funding gain-of-function research labs around the world, like the Wuhan Institute of Virology with its CCP connection. You know, you got that kind of field. You've got physics, where people are kind of caught up in a house of mirrors, lost in math, as Sabina Hassenfelder, the physicist, wrote in her book, where people get lost in equationism, obsessed with elegant equations that don't necessarily touch reality. All of these distortions in scientific progress happen when you introduce a government as the monopoly kind of elephant in the room of funding. If you have competitive funding sources, if government were to get out of the way, which it won't because it's too lucrative to get in the way, but if you had government get out of the way and then foundations and nonprofits and companies were all left alone to competitively fund research and so forth, you would have a more healthy, competitive environment of voices and evidence in scientific investigations. But we don't have that. And so many of our fields of knowledge are retarded by groupthink. They're held back by groupthink because of that monopoly. This is so important, folks. I want you to understand this. This is not just about the biggest story right now that everybody's dealing with the pandemic and the politics surrounding, immune system information, things like that, all that. That's a problem. But it's not just this. It's something that is baked. That's why we don't get into, we don't have time for conspiracy theories, because all you have to do is understand human nature. And human nature, just doesn't do the best work when you have a monopoly of funding. It warps the scientific dissent. It warps funding going towards, a contrarian perspective, a Galileo perspective, a Nikola Tesla perspective, right? A Wright brother perspective, right? It distorts that. And it holds that back. And therefore, we all suffer. We stay in the dark ages for a lot of things that we should not be in the dark ages for. And so the commenter is right that there is a kind of de facto priesthood of so-called science, which is not scientific, but rather politically. And even if they mean well, of course they mean well. We always assume that everybody means well, that they're not just being selfish. But even if you mean well, when you have a monopoly of funding and it's so politicized, then your department or your research lab is not going to have the funding or the impetus to question some of the reigning paradigms of what we're supposed to do in a certain field of science. And so so what has happened? Millions of people have been affected. Just look at nutrition alone. So many people have ignorance about, nutrition, that generations of people have been sickened with chronic illnesses that have come about because of vegetable oils being introduced into the public and being sold as healthy alternatives to animal fats. Horrible, horrible consequences. Government was the one pushing all that stuff. Do they get held accountable? No. Do they get their budget cut? No. Do they get fired? No. Does anybody get a lawsuit? No. They just walk off with a pension, or they walk off also with a revolving door relationship with the companies that benefited from their ignorant approach to scientific nutritional information. You see how this works? Tucker Goodrich, who we have on the program, he's a nutrition researcher, and he's commenting on this comment that another guy on Twitter says. His name is Alex Brinson. He says, wow, CDC government only wants to examine post-vaccine infections with a PCR threshold of 28 or under. That standard ignores 90+% of COVID infections. The entire epidemic would have looked very different if it had been used. An RT-PCR count value of 28 or under is what CDC guidelines are. And Tucker Goodrich says they're finished juicing the numbers. Now they want to suppress them. But that's an example. I mean, again, I'd have to, we have to double check this and make sure. But, you look at that link and it looks like they're accurately linking to the CDC. And it's saying, that post-vaccine infections with the PCR threshold of 28 or under that's the only one that the CDC only wants to examine post-vaccine infections with a PCR threshold of 28 or under. That standard ignores 90+% of COVID infections. So you see how you put in the vaccine and all of a sudden, oh, look, all the infections are dropping. Well, maybe you've changed the standard of what you're reporting, and therefore it skews the information. Why do we have to put up with this childish, ignorant attack against science? If you're changing the standards, don't we have a right to have a debate about that? I'm tired of this inane groupthink just stupefying people. People just want to be a part of the cool crowd. And right now it's cool to say the word science and know nothing about what science is. So that's the new cool, trendy thing to do. Tina on YouTube comment stream on our YouTube stream says, never been done before by 3 companies, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, that have never brought a vaccine successfully to market, none FDA approved. And I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson have brought vaccines successfully to the market, but Pfizer never has. Am I correct on that? Moderna Moderna is the one that's never brought any drug to the market before this one. But I believe Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson have put vaccines on the market before. But if I'm incorrect, I'd be glad to hear that. But it's true that none of them are FDA approved. Another commenter says, Western governments have consistently used ridiculous data points like positivity rates and daily case totals when they distract from the simple data that mattered in this virus, which was the ICU percentage rates. And yet the media and government have insisted on focusing on other out-of-context data points that were useful to drive hysteria. And that's true. I mean, what you have is a lot of, again, how many investors, you look at these big investment companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, are the same massive investment forces in the pharmaceutical companies, as the media companies, as the food companies. And then it becomes a little bit more clear why human nature is what it is and is going to be a little bit more biased about being honest and self-critical of one's own products. You know, it's like asking Walmart to be very self-critical about all of their policies and employment practices if Walmart was the one running the television or, you know, having a major investment in so many of the television networks. You know, it's just ridiculous. Human nature is going to be self-interested. And that's why the founders understood, at least at some degree, that you need to limit as much as you possibly can imagine the ability for human nature to get a hold of giant, unaccountable mechanisms of monopoly government. So Magic Marker, a YouTube commenter, says, saw your clip with Zizek, and I thought you did a great job helping him understand how decentralized solutions are better than central planning. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And that was Slavoj Žižek, for those of you who don't know, is a communist philosopher, one of the world's most famous advocates of communism, considered to be kind of a rock star in that world of academic communism. He's kind of a rival to Noam Chomsky, the other anarchist. I guess he would be considered more of, I don't know, I guess he's an anarchist, right? Chomsky. But, you know, you got, you know, a lot of fans out there for Zizek. And we try our best to give a healthy conversation, even with communists. We'd be glad to have conversation. We had a conversation with theologian David Bentley Hart, who's a socialist and also a noted New Testament translator. And I think he's completely wrong about how he interprets the Christian ethic of nonviolence and critique of corporatism. I think he gets it totally wrong in how he applies it to modern politics, but at least he's trying to have a conversation about the political implications of Jesus. He gets it totally wrong on a lot of things, but at least he's having that attempt. And he did not want to have any kind of common conversation with me. I tried to say, hey, well, let's look for things that we can agree on. He didn't want to have it because I love liberty. And liberty is the enemy in some people's minds. I don't want to have nothing to do with liberty. I want a state that can control and keep people doing what they're supposed to do. But that's just an ignorant approach to understanding human nature. Human nature does not do well when you have unaccountable monopolies. And you can talk about elections being the accountability that government has, but it just doesn't work out that way, does it? Remember what we heard when Colonel Doug McGregor came on this program, who was working at the Pentagon on behalf of President Donald Trump to try to end the Afghanistan war, as he promised he would do, with thunderous applause the entire campaign? What happened? He said that Trump's own Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, actively did not want to accomplish Trump's own foreign policy. And he put up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock of stalling the ending of the Afghanistan war. And so did so many other people in the personnel of the Trump administration. So how is it that when we elect someone who's supposed to end the wars and they don't have the staff in place to actually accomplish it, and they do the opposite of their desires, then how can we say that we have accountability with democracy? The idea of democracy is that you vote people in who do things that they're promising to do, and you fire the people who have displeased the majority. That's the concept of democracy. It doesn't work that way, though. because the whole majority is being totally displeased with both parties, and yet they get over and over again elected. Very high re-election rate in the Senate, very high re-election rate in the House many times. And the cities that, they're supposed to be the bastions of progress continue to decline. They continue to be plagued by cronyism, and nothing ever changes, right? So we cannot look to the world of politics to have real solutions. We have to look to the world of science, the world of nutrition, the world of, physics, the world of nuclear energy. That's where we need to be putting our focus on. Transportation revolutions, whatever it is. If you like crypto, that's a big thing that people want to talk about. Talk about it. If you're interested in these things, these are the places where we can make the best progress. Not in the world of politics. Politics will always disappoint us. Politics will always let us down, because politics is the art of the crowd, and the crowd is a lie. The crowd will deceive us. The crowd does not know what it's doing. The crowd is swept up in passions, in ignorance, in groupthink, in fear. And that is not where progress is made. We have to be aware of that when we look at the problems that we face today. We cannot expect some president to save us. That was the problem of the MAGA Trump thing, is that they put too much hope and faith in a man to, accomplish all these grandiose claims. That's an idolization of human beings, which is just not normal. But that's what politics is, right? It's all about idolization on both sides. Barack Obama was presented as a change agent, and all he did was start regime change wars and horrible imperialistic, blunderous decisions around the world, and lots of corporate welfare, lots of happy Wall Street redistribution of wealth from the poor to the middle class to the rich under Obama. But he had good rhetoric, and that's the problem for our time today, is that rhetoric trumps reality, doesn't it? People are more interested in having their, ears tickled by rhetoric, or their ears soothed by sweet-sounding rhetoric, than they are about the reality of the things that they're hiring on their behalf to be done. And that is at the heart of our problems today. So we have to put politics on the back burner. We have to put skin in the game and innovation and science and technology and startup entrepreneurship as our priority. And if we do that, guess what, folks? We can really accelerate a lot of progress. We can really accelerate a lot of positivity, a lot of hope, and a lot of renaissance in our own local communities. I'm David Gornosky. We'll take another quick break and return with more news headlines after this.
Hello, this is David Gornosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski here live on radio, where you can drop us a comment. Just go to youtube.com, search for David Gronowski, see if you can find us live. Some people have a hard time finding it live, but you can also go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, where you can listen to the audio stream live from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, as well as all of our radio episodes right after we finish the live broadcast. We cut them up into hour by hour usually, and then we publish them with a video as well as an audio that you can download at whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And I wanted to comment on this tweet that Dr. Naomi Wolf, who is a progressive, she's been out there, she's been working with the Clintons and so forth for a long time. She's also been someone who's, passionate about civil liberties and things like that. She says, I'm getting calls from progressive friends and associates to bully me for talking to conservatives about liberty and for reporting on vaccine menstrual issues. I'm being warned of social isolation and professional repercussions. How can I stop doing what I've always done? And Dr. Naomi Wolf, I don't agree with all of her opinions, but that's the point, is that, if you're a civilized adult, you don't want to threaten them with social isolation and canceling and all this stuff if they disagree with you. Normal civilized adults who are rational, who are scientifically interested in the facts, they don't do that. Losers' ideas, people with losing ideas, people with fascist sensibilities, those are the people who call up friends and say, you're going to be socially isolated if you talk to those people. That's what bigots do. That's what bigots have always done. That's how the McWoke groupthink ideology is failing, because they can't tolerate anybody, even on their own side. They treat them the worst. They viciously attack Glenn Greenwald because he doesn't buy the garbage out of the military-industrial complex. Now they're going after Naomi Wolf because she dares to talk to people who are not in their little cult. This is pathetic. Who shames and bullies people and warns of social isolation and repercussions? That's what cult members do. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. That's what cults do. If you talk to the only kind of people who shame and bully and warn of social isolation, if you talk to somebody they don't like, are people who are bullies and cult members. And that's what the McWoke left has become. All politics is ultimately religious behavior, right? But it just gets more nasty and vicious and more transparently cult-like as those ideologies fail to maintain their confidence in the public discourse. And that's exactly what's happening with the corporatism on the left. They can't handle it. They can't afford to have, people in conservative circles and populist circles and liberty circles. Folks like that disagree about everything. And no one's trying, I got to get rid of you. I got to tell you, you're going to be canceled if you disagree with me on this issue. No, we don't do that because we're functioning adults, right? But people who have lost their mind in hysteria and dogmatic worship of human beings in the form of state action are people who as their worldview starts to fall apart, they become more vicious in their proselytizing efforts. So can you imagine doing that yourself, calling up somebody and saying, hey, I heard you were talking to, I talked to Slavoj Žižek. He's a communist. Does anybody who loves liberty and loves nonviolence and loves personhood like I do they try to cancel me because I talked to a communist, Žižek? No, because we're civilized adults. We're not bigots. You see the difference? If you're a bigot with failed ideas and you've become so low information that you just buy whatever the television tells you to, then, it's kind of hard to help people in that situation. They become owned by groupthink. They become submitted to a herd mentality. And all that does is just slow us up with drama and nonsense. And that's the last thing we need to be dealing with right now. We need to get facts. We need to have scientific debate. We need to have scientific progress. And the only way we're going to get that is if we stop relying on all of this constant bullying and shame culture. This goes back thousands of years, folks. When Dr. Naomi Wolf says that she's getting progressive friends calling her, saying to shame her, to bully her because she talks to conservatives, when they tell her they're warning her of social isolation and professional repercussions, that's nothing new. That is the origin of human beings. It's called the scapegoat mechanism. That's what birthed human culture, is human beings coming together. United we stand, divided we fall. And what united people? What united people for thousands and thousands of years in our ancient past was a common scapegoat. And so when people are calling her up, they're basically just performing the same primitive ritual that's been happening thousands and thousands of years ago. When they call up Dr. Naomi Wolf as a progressive and say, hey, you're going to get your progressive social standing isolated, what they're saying is, hey, I'm so brutish that I'm still operating on a ancient scapegoat mechanism ritual, and I'm so pathetic that I can't be self-aware of that and treat you as a human being even though you disagree. That's how pathetic that is. That has nothing to do with progress. That's reactionary as heck. There's nothing more reactionary than going along with ancient primitive ritual scapegoating mechanisms. And by mechanisms, I mean a social psychological mechanism. Because that's exactly what scapegoating is. We're going to socially isolate you if you're too different from us. Oh, wow, that's progressive. No, that's pathetic. It's embarrassing. Stinks. How immature. How uncouth is that? It's pathetic, right? But that's how people who are stuck on that old religious impulse of sacrificial bullying, that's how they treat people. Oh, if you hang out with this person is a taboo person. If you hang out with them, we will have to make you feel physically isolated. We will have to, make you feel professionally destroyed. We have to take some of the cash away from your pocketbook so that you feel pain and misery because you don't share the same ideas that we do. Ew, gross. That's how we should be responding to this stuff. Not talking about how this is just naivete or this is all about, just people who are just too caring. No, this is cruelty. It's cruelty and it's barbaric. It's vulgar, right? To talk to someone who's supposed to be a friend of yours who agrees with you on 99% of the things, but because they talk to conservatives about, health freedom issues and civil liberty issues, now you're going to say, hey, you're not allowed to be my friend. We want you to feel isolated. That's pathetic. Isn't that embarrassing? But yet that's exactly how millions of folks continue to be enthralled in that kind of mindset. And we just have to be patient. We cannot respond on the same level. I hear a lot of conservatives and liberty folks and so forth say, oh, we got to cancel them back. We have to cancel and ban critical theory. And I think, nah, you're just following into the same mirror reaction that Conservative Inc. always does. No, we have to provide a forward vision leadership. And that is with innovation and ingenuity. I'm David Gronowski. We'll be back with Hour 2 in just a moment. But for now, you can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com or drop us a YouTube comment or Facebook comment on our video stream. Godspeed.
home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. President Biden says he wants to raise the maximum number of refugees allowed into the U.S. this fiscal year. ABC's Karen Travers has details from Washington.
President Biden is officially raising the nation's refugee cap to 62,500 this fiscal year after facing weeks of pushback for not moving quickly enough to raise the cap from the 15,000 set by the Trump administration. In a statement, the president said that number, an historic low, quote, did not reflect America's values as a nation that welcomes and supports refugees. Still, the president called it a, quote, sad truth that the U.S. will not achieve 62,500 admissions this year due to what he called, quote, the damage of the last 4 years.
Earlier today, the president and first lady were in Virginia to tout his proposed investments in childcare and education. He also urged people to take action against COVID-19.
My plea to everyone, get vaccinated now, please.
32% of the U.S. population is now fully vaccinated. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, said capacity limits in his state, along with New Jersey and Connecticut, will all be lifted by May 19th. Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, today announced that he's using his executive authority to end all local restrictions related to coronavirus. The U.S. troop withdrawal has begun in Afghanistan, but there have been flares of violence that have been linked to the Taliban. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby asked today if that could impact plans for a full withdrawal by September 11th.
We've seen nothing thus far that has affected the drawdown or had any significant impact on the mission at hand in Afghanistan.
Bill and Melinda Gates announced in a joint statement they are ending their marriage of 27 years, but will continue working together at the charitable foundation that bears both of their names. The couple has 3 children. Gates is the world's 4th richest person, according to Forbes. You're listening to ABC News.
The past year validates the resiliency of America's small businesses, and the UPS Store is celebrating small business owners who've managed to adapt and, most importantly, persist. The UPS Store president, Tim Davis.
We've teamed up with Inc. magazine as well as chef, author, and TV host Carla Hall for the 3rd annual Small Biz Challenge to highlight those businesses who refuse to let the pandemic stop them. The winner could take home up to $25,000 and an editorial feature in an upcoming issue of Inc. magazine and on Inc.com.
A survey commissioned by the UPS Store found more than half of consumers and a little more than 2/3 of small business owners made plans to buy more products or services from small businesses. That certainly helps, but there are more ways to provide support.
Don't underestimate your ability to help local business owners. Encourage your friends and family to support small businesses. Leave them positive reviews or ratings online, and remember to treat those small business employees with respect.
Learn more about the Small Biz Challenge and how to participate at Inc.com/the UPS Store.
Friends and family gathering today in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, for the funeral for Andrew Brown Jr. He was shot and killed last month as sheriff's deputies tried to serve drug warrants at his property. Brown's oldest son, Khalil Faribi, said,
I just want to say, everybody keep their heads up, and keep God, in your prayers, because He going to work all this out for us.
Deputies said they opened fire when his vehicle hit officers as he tried to escape. His family says he was driving away trying to escape gunfire. Authorities in Wisconsin say the man who shot and killed 2 people and injured a 3rd at a Green Bay casino Saturday night had been fired from his job at a restaurant on the property and banned. The gunman was shot and killed by police. Authorities say it appears to be a targeted attack. The officer who did fire the shot is being investigated. The Supreme Court's appointed a female military officer as its new marshal overseeing operations.
U.S. Army Colonel Gail Curley will be the 11th marshal of the Supreme Court and the 2nd woman ever to hold the job. She'll lead all of the court's operations from its police force to cybersecurity to managing facilities. And she'll also be the one to make this traditional cry,
oyez, oyez, oyez,
which opens each session with the 9 justices. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
Little League Baseball says this summer's Little League World Series will be played only among U.S. teams because of the pandemic. This is ABC News.
O'Reilly. Ready for an oil change? Our professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts recommend all the best products to get the job done right. Like 5 quarts of Mobil 1 full synthetic motor oil on sale now just $28.95. And we'll make sure you have all the supplies you need, including a filter, funnel, shop towels, drain pan, and more. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Brian Clark, ABC News.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
What's better than a stimulus check? Another stimulus check. If you have full coverage insurance, you qualify for up to $150 cash back for your broken windshield. Autoglass America will install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Wherever you are, Autoglass America comes to you with free mobile service. Make your money go farther with Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS. That's 813-96-GLASS. Autoglass America.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. Welcome back to our second hour of today's live radio broadcast. We're coming to you around the world online on our video stream and podcast. All of it you can find at unneighborschoice.com, our homepage for all of our content. And let's continue looking at some of the news together and trying to make sense of this strange time of transition, I believe, to a better place of liberty and nonviolence, empathy. But it's always a rocky time every time you have a transition of culture, and there's always good and bad that happens. And everybody always believes that they're at the end of the world, and everybody always believes that they're tyrants and wannabe nanny state folks are the worst ever. But not always the case, but oftentimes humans feel that way, right? They feel like, you know what, this is the worst it's ever been. But in a lot of ways it isn't, right? A lot of ways, because of the personhood revolution that Jesus inaugurated over 2,000 years ago, we have more respect for the least of these. We have more respect for the individual person than ever before. And it's been trampled in the last year, but that's a blip in the radar of the grand scheme of human history. And tyrants have to increasingly act like saints and loving, caring, saintly type folks in order to justify their schemes in our time today, which shows that the grand story of Jesus's the stone the builders rejected being the cornerstone is truly in the driver's seat of history. What does that mean, by the way? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. It means that the builders of humanity, the builders of, let's say, human civilization and history, rejected Jesus. Meaning, we, human beings, in our attempts to make sense of the world, in our attempts to create religion and culture and society and government, when that encountered the force of the person of Jesus, the builders rejected. They rejected the stone. It was misshapen. It didn't fit in. But as a misshapen stone, it was set aside. And at the end of the day, the misshapen stone became the cornerstone. It became, in other ways of looking at it, the capstone. The cornerstone being the first stone, the capstone being the last stone. And this is a big project of human history. This is an anthropological symbol, what we're talking about. And Jesus being the stone that's rejected, in the act of being rejected, he becomes the cornerstone. He becomes the new animating force of history. And that's why all tyrants and politically correct, all tyrants and wannabe, leaders and messiah figures in politics and globalism today, they all have to act politically correct. They all have to act like they are basically wannabe Jesuses, that they care about, the least of these. And that's why they do all the stuff they do for the giant corporations that give them their power. Okay, thank you. So convenient. Look at this quote from Soren Kierkegaard. Christ was crucified because he would have nothing to do with the crowd, even though he addressed himself to all. He did not want to form a party, an interest group, a mass movement, but wanted to be what he was, the truth, which is related to the single individual. Therefore, everyone who will genuinely serve the truth is by that very fact a martyr. To win a crowd is no art. For that, only untruth is needed, nonsense, and a little knowledge of human passions. But no witness to the truth dares to get involved with the crowd. And that idea of individual liberty that the West is on the precipice of throwing away for convenience and ignorance is birthed from the same phenomenon of Jesus that Soren Kierkegaard's describing in that quote. There was no conception of the individual person prior to the arrival of Jesus's personhood revolution in history. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like a political ideology that just forced its way onto people as soon as he showed up. No, it took time for humans to catch up and put in place protections like presumption of innocence and habeas corpus and a right to a fair and speedy trial, these different concepts. No victim, no crime, these concepts of absolute freedom of speech, absolute freedom of assembly, absolute freedom of religion, the right to express and worship as one pleases, the right to defend oneself. These are things that are coming out of Jesus's impact in history, in which human beings will no longer be considered expendable by the collective, but that they will be considered to be the place in which God's Spirit dwells, temples, if you will. Rene Girard, someone I talk about a lot on this show, he says, God says, if nobody else is good enough to sacrifice himself rather than his brother, I will do it. Therefore, I fulfill God's requirement for man. I prefer to die than to kill, but all other men prefer to kill than to die. And in other words, that's the spirit of the politics that we see in our world today, that people would rather kill than to sacrifice their life. That human beings seem to have this incessant desire to rule over one another, to dominate over others, and to make them our vassals, to become their patron, and to lord over people. Jesus talked about that too, didn't he? And yet, at the heart of it all is this question. Do we sacrifice ourselves or do we sacrifice another? No wonder Jesus is very hated by all the folks that are in the cool crowd today, all the people who want to use their soaring rhetoric to sell stinky microwaved tyranny. Because his message upends all of those power plays and word games. His message makes us put self-sacrifice as the animus of everything we do rather than sacrifice of another. It's so important. It's not always about, physically killing or, in this quote, he says, I prefer to die than to kill, right? That God laid down his life rather than to smite his enemies in vengeance. But that permeates the mentality of so much of our ideology battles today. Again, it's not only just a physical killing, it's also social killing. We read that quote from Dr. Naomi Wolf, the progressive Democrat who's talking about other Democrats trying to tell her that she'll be socially isolated. That's like social death. Humans were meant to be in communion with one another. Humans were meant to have community, to have fellowship. We're interdividual creatures. We are meant to have relationship. And so when human beings come to you and say, if you do this, or if you think this, or if you talk to these people, you will be socially cut off. What they are talking about is social death. And that's excruciatingly painful. It's very vicious to do that to people. There's almost nothing worse than true social death. There's different levels and degrees of it, right? But that is something that nobody wants to really deal with. And yet, that again goes to that question, that choice that Renee Girard is talking about there, that Jesus made in the story of the cross. Nobody else is good enough to sacrifice himself rather than his brother. I will do it. All other men prefer to kill than to die. Meaning all others prefer their own privilege, their own comfort, their own power, their own bigotry, their own self-deceit over allowing their neighbor to be who they want to be without being harmed. We just can't afford to allow other people to have their freedom. So we'd rather sacrifice their freedom for our in-group privileges. And that's why McWokeism is a ridiculous joke, because it's trying to quarantine human evil and human privileges and human decadence and human oppression into one race or one gender or one culture or one this or that, trying to quarantine the guilt that indicts all of humanity since the dawn of time. That's the battle of our time. Can we look at that question of self-sacrifice versus sacrifice of another and realize that it holds a mirror to all of us? Or are we going to persist in our ignorance, turn on the TV, turn up the music in our headphones, and numb ourselves out into destruction? A Neighbor's Choice will return in just a moment.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm your host, David Gronowski. Aaron on our YouTube stream says, we need to popularize the term vulgar progressivism. The only way to defeat cancel culture is by shaming its perpetrators. Another commenter says, I drove by the local school today and kids were on the playground with masks on. And that's always sad to see that, kids have to become, tools of their parents, cultish devotion to failed groupthink, not based in science, but based in political, chest beating, troglodyte type behavior. Kids should not be running around in a playground with a mask on. Kids should not be eating seed oil sludge, but your government thinks they should too, I guess, right? I saw this meme that we shared. It's a picture of a man having his heart ripped out. It says, are you sure this will bring the rain? And the response from those doing the sacrifice is, shut up and listen to the experts. That transcendent, subservient, falling in line mentality around those who act like they're gods or priests is so primordial. And that's why it's so hard to overcome, right? At least in the short term. The way you overcome it, I'll tell you how to overcome it, is by making art that undermines that framework of ignorance. Art that puts a perspective that centers on the victims around us. The victims that the TV tries to, drown out because it doesn't fit into their political, ideological goals. I call it the gospel technology, whether it's a film, a documentary, a narrative film, whether it's a song, a music video, puppet show, performance art, whatever it is. Could be a podcast, this radio show. You have to perform the voice of the victim. True victims all around us, whether it's the victims of Joe Biden's war on drugs, whether it's the victims of Kamala Harris incarcerating nonviolent people to get to where she's at, or the victims of everyone. It's not just those folks. They're just the ones that are the latest flavors of the day that the media tries to manufacture into some kind of heroes when they should not be considered as such. They're only a hero so long as their victims' voices are silenced. When you hear their voices of the victims that they have, ground to a pulp to get to where they're at, their hero brand goes away really fast. Humans are storytelling creatures. They're not facts and rational, statistics-driven people. Humans operate based on story and passion and then the feelings, right? That's where it all comes in terms of culture. Amy Tarkanian says, the Washington Post has just announced that it will no longer keep a presidential fact-checking database under President Biden. Democracy really does die in darkness. Because they're not media outlets. They are PR firms for the special interests that are staffing the Biden administration. That's all that is. That's what they're there for. That's what they're there for. Meanwhile, we have fears of inflation because of all the money that's been printed out of thin air by both parties because of their ignorant response to this virus. Soaring lumber prices add nearly $36,000 to the price of a new home, NAHB says. This is in zerohedge.com. Skyrocketing lumber prices that have tripled over the past 12 months have driven the price of an average new single-family home to rise by $35,872, according to new analysis by the National Association of Home Builders, with a price spike threatening to hobble the momentum of the U.S. housing market, one of the bright stars of the recovery from the pandemic recession. While home builder sentiment remains optimistic, as indicated by the NAHB Housing Market Index, headwinds due to rising building costs have pulled the index down from recent highs. The supply chain for residential construction is tight, particularly regarding the cost and availability of lumber, appliances, and other building materials. NAHB Chairman Chuck Falk said in a statement, said, so, I think inflation is a real thing to be concerned about. Look at this other story in zerohedge.com. The costs are up. We're seeing substantial inflation, admits a surprised Warren Buffett, as Powell and Yellen see nothing. We're seeing very substantial inflation, the 90-year-old billionaire who apparently does not have a Fed charge card said in his nearly 8-hour-long address to investors. But it's what he said that was especially ominous. It's very interesting. We're raising prices. People are raising prices to us, and it's being accepted. Why does this matter? Because the ability to pass on price increases and have them stick means the surge in prices will not be transitory, no matter how many times the Biden admin, the Fed, or the Treasury lie and vow the opposite. Buffett's comments came one day after the U.S. revealed the household incomes rose by the most in recorded history in March as the latest round of Biden stimulus hit bank accounts. This has also pushed the total amount of government transfer payments to a record 34%. That's right, a third of all U.S. household income is now from the state. Marx would be proud. The surge in income, which for now has resulted in record excess savings of roughly $2 trillion, has sent reverberations throughout the financial markets, with investor inflation expectations over the next decade rising to an 8-year high. It just won't stop, Buffett added. People have money in their pocket and they'll pay the higher prices. There's more inflation going on that people would have anticipated 6 months ago or thereabouts, he added. We urge readers to go over the full exchange because the world Buffett lives in and the one populated by the clueless career economists of the Fed are apparently totally different. So he's saying, Buffett says, so we really do a lot of housing. The costs are up. Steel costs, just every day they're going up. And there hasn't yet been because the wage stuff follows. I mean, the UAW writes a 3-year contract. We got a 3-year contract. But if you're buying steel at General Motors or someplace, you're paying more every day. So it's an economy, really, it's red hot. I mean, and we weren't expecting it. I mean, all our companies, when they were allowed to go back to work, well, various operations, we closed the furniture stores I mentioned. So there's just more inflation going on than quite a bit more inflation going on than people would have anticipated just six months ago, he says again. So, that's something that, again, the Fed, central banks, is one of the foundations of the Communist Manifesto, right? You have to have a central bank, and it's working just like one would expect a plank of the Communist Manifesto to work, to undermine the integrity of markets and wealth and savings, and to destroy the foundation of what makes for a prosperous society. It's happening here. And it's happening with the media giving it thunderous applause and affirmation and trying to sell you on it every single day. And both parties are in on it. Trump didn't do anything to cut spending. He was, his supporters, a lot of them are mad that he didn't get to do enough stimulus himself directly to the people. And I know that's a tough situation because the government had a hand in artificially shuttering a lot of businesses. So there is some argument one could make that they owe something to the people, but this isn't going to do anything for people in the long run except for destroy their purchasing power, to undermine their dollar, to undermine their savings, and to wipe out wages and make them something that just continues to erode in terms of real gains and real value. So this is a tough situation that we find ourselves in, but it's not that hard to understand how to get out, but you have to have the courage to think for yourself. You have to understand that no party, no Mitch McConnell, no Paul Ryan, no whoever you can think of, Nikki Haley, nobody's going to give you the solution. It's got to be you taking care of yourself, taking care of your finances, staying out of debt completely, taking care of your health, getting out of government education, getting a good equipment of information you need for your family and your kids and your grandkids. That's what's going to take it. That's what it's going to take to move this to a better place. But it's going to be tough. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment.
Politics these days are just that, politics. Pathetic discussions about things that don't matter, while the pandemic, crime, and economic disparity march on. That's why you need a balanced approach to news, business, and entertainment in the state of Florida. That publication is newstalkflorida.com. Whether it's the White House, the courthouse, or your neighbor's house, News Talk Florida has the sources, articles, video, and audio that will be a must daily check-in from your laptop or mobile device. Take a look at newstalkflorida.com. Today's news and entertainment with a Florida.
It's been a day of strong storms across the South. This man and his wife watched from their porch in Walton County, Georgia, as a tornado seemed to come out of nowhere.
It was a direct drop, like you drop a rock in a pond. And it hit one spot and just stayed for about 60 seconds.
At least one death is blamed on the weather, a man in Georgia. President Biden raising the nation's refugee admissions cap to 62,500 this year. Funeral services today for Andrew Brown Jr. He was killed in a police shooting as deputies attempted to serve drug-related search and arrest warrants. Brown's death led to protests and calls for transparency over claims that he was killed in his vehicle while he was trying to escape officers' gunfire. Bill and Melinda Gates are divorcing after 27 years of marriage. The Microsoft co-founder and his wife both tweeting that they'll continue to work together at the charitable organization they founded. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice returns. We're continuing our look at the news, trying to make sense of this wild world. Look at this story here in the Daily Beast, which is a nice establishment-friendly PR talking points kind of outlet. But every now and then they get some cracks of information that are valuable. U.S. captured, tortured, and cleared him, but he's still in Gitmo. Abu Zubaydah was a human guinea pig for the CIA's post-9/11 torture. Almost 20 years later, as the U.S. moves on, he's still trying to get out of Guantanamo. It's been 19 years, the article says. It's been 19 years since the U.S. forces captured Mohammed Hussein and declared him one of the senior leaders of al-Qaeda. It's been 15 years since the CIA quietly revoked that assessment once it was done torturing him. Today, Hussein, a forgotten man, remains locked inside Guantanamo Bay, a living symbol of the permanent damage wrought by the war on terror. As the Biden administration performs the latest government review into closing Guantanamo, attorneys for Hussein, better known as Abu Zubaydah, have decided they've waited long enough. They filed a petition on Friday with the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention seeking his release from his 19 years of captivity. They want the panel to exercise its urgent actions procedures to appeal to Washington for his freedom, citing his counsel's serious concerns for his physical and mental health and welfare stretching back for years. Once Abu Zubaydah was said to be one of the most important al-Qaeda captives of all. An infamous August 2002 memo from the Justice Department, instrumental to authorizing the CIA to torture him, and after him, at least 118 others called him third or fourth man in al-Qaeda, but there were doubts inside the CIA at the outset. According to the landmark Senate torture report on August 16, 2006, the agency formally concluded that Abu Zubaydah was Zubaydah, I think it's, I'll get that pronunciation correct soon, was not a member of al-Qaeda. Instead of freeing him, the U.S. brought him to Guantanamo Bay the following month, where he became the forgotten man he currently is. You know, that's the thing, that the media tries to present the CIA and all these different people as, you know, they just put out a new video from the CIA about how socially just and intersectional and millennial friendly and anxiety disorder friendly they are and so forth. But yet, how do they justify this stuff? They want to act like they're the McWoke, you know, agency, but how come they're doing this kind of stuff? What's their answer in the McWoke ideology for that? How is that socially just to put a man who's the wrong guy, the wrong Abu, in the torturous conditions that he's been in? That's the wrong guy, mistaken identity. There's another story. CNN, which is surprising that they're reporting it, but Biden team may partner with private firms to surveil suspected domestic terrorists online. The Biden administration is considering using outside forces to track extremist chatter by Americans online, an effort that would expand the government's ability to gather intelligence but could draw criticism over surveillance of U.S. citizens. The Department of Homeland Security is limited in how it can monitor citizens online without justification and is banned from activities like assuming false identities to gain access to private messaging apps used by extremist groups such as the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers. Instead, federal authorities can only browse through unprotected information on social media sites like Twitter and Facebook and other open online platforms. The plan being discussed inside DHS, according to multiple sources, would, in effect, allow the department to circumvent those limits. A source familiar with the effort said it is not about decrypting data, but rather using outside entities who can legally access these private groups to gather large amounts of information that could help DHS identify key narratives as they emerge. By partnering with research firms who have more visibility in this space, the DHS could produce information that would likely be beneficial to both it and the FBI, which can't monitor U.S. citizens in this way without first getting a warrant or having the pretext of an ongoing investigation. The CIA and NSA are also limited on collecting intelligence domestically. It would, however, involve empowering a unit at DHS that is already under fierce scrutiny for its bungled handling of the Portland riots last summer, an episode that included collecting intelligence reports on journalists and unmasking private citizens, according to a source familiar with the recent internal report on the matter. So again, they're just always looking for opportunities to surveil citizens and to treat them the way we were told after 9/11, oh, that will only be surveilled against terrorists. And then they get the wrong guy, like the Abu we just mentioned, the guy Abu who's in prison now in Gitmo still after being tortured. And then you've got this story where there's, we heard about the post office apparently has got a whole department just looking at social media posts all day instead of getting the mail delivered on time. And they're over there just, reporting anything that looks, I guess, politically advantageous to report on. It's just bizarre how politicized everything is just transparently becoming. How quickly and without any, attempt to sell it as not political witch hunt stuff. CBS12.com says DeSantis suspends all local COVID-19 emergency orders. And this is out of St. Petersburg. Governor DeSantis signed several executive orders to immediately suspend and eventually invalidate by July 1st all local emergency orders related to COVID-19. This includes local mask mandates and curfews. Although the governor was met with enthusiasm during his news conference in St. Petersburg on Monday, some local leaders say they were blindsided by the announcement and fear it undermines their authority to protect residents. Anytime that local government is preempted by the state, it just sends a message that we don't matter, Commissioner Melissa McKinley told CBS 12. To completely just yank the rug out from what should be a partner in this pandemic response is uncalled for. So they don't want to give up their power and nanny state smothering of their people. They want to be able to look virtuous and, tell people what to do. People like bossing people around. You ever seen some of these crazy HOA stories? People love bossing people around and just micromanaging other people's lives and bullying them if they don't like it. So I'm glad that DeSantis is doing that and stopping that stuff. It should have happened a long time ago. But that's what we have to deal with, is that there's this incessant desire for people to want to micromanage and bully people and control their lives. And if you dissent from them, they just want to, they can't handle it. They can't handle you disagreeing with them. Speaking of people who get canceled and so forth, there's a story here in the Wall Street Journal The Man They Couldn't Cancel by Barton Swain. Mobs have targeted Jordan Peterson, but he hasn't lost his university job and his publishers have stuck by him. What's his secret? The term cancel culture, like political correctness before it, is a comical expression for an ugly cultural pathology. To be canceled, an older, closely related term, is blacklisted, is to have your public persona or influence assailed, typically by a sizable mob for some real or perceived offense against progressive orthodoxy, whatever that orthodoxy may hold at the moment. For that to happen, you must possess some form of authority in the first place, an academic post, a political office, a role in the entertainment industry, employment with a mainstream media organization, a voice as an intellectual or imaginative writer. But the targets of cancellation, having derived their legitimacy from consensus left liberal culture, are typically not very good at defending themselves or even understanding what happened to them. Often they apologize despite having said or done nothing wrong, which only emboldens the cancelers, or they fall back on pieties about free speech and the marketplace of ideas as if their tormentors still believed in those principles. One target of cancellation who is able to speak intelligently about it is Jordan Peterson, the University of Toronto clinical psychologist, YouTube lecturer, and author of 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order. If you're an ordinary curious person, Mr. Peterson won't strike you as a likely target for moral outrage. He brings together a dizzying array of texts and traditions, Jungian psychoanalysis, the Hebrew Bible and New Testament, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, and much else to formulate basic lessons or rules about how humans might overcome their natural tendency to lassitude and savagery. His books, podcasts, and lectures are impressively argued, frequently insightful, and occasionally abrasive presentations of various principles of wise living. And so it just goes on to say, how did he withstand all of it? How did he withstand all the attempts to continually, muddy his name and cancel him? In the end, the article says Mr. Peterson hasn't been successfully canceled. He retains his academic post, his YouTube lectures and podcasts have not been scrubbed from the internet, and his publishers stuck with his books, which are available for purchase. This is true for basically two reasons. The first is that he has tried to understand his would-be cancelers and thinks of them almost as outpatients. He speaks in gentle, clinical terms about a reporter for the New York Times who in 2018 wrote a scathing piece about him headlined Jordan Peterson, Custodian of the Patriarchy, and later posted online what sounded like a confession. The roar of Twitter on my side meant the kill was justified and good. He has, as best as I can tell, genuine pity for this writer. The second reason follows from the first. The canceller's strange fixations mean that apologizing to them is folly. Mr. Peterson hasn't apologized or disavowed any previous statement. Now there's a rule for his next book. Don't apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. And I think this is a good point that I wanted to reiterate to you, which is in ancient society, let's go back to anthropology for a moment, or even in more recent contemporary, a few hundred years ago history, a witch hunt mob needs their victim to confess guilt in order for them to go along with the final thing of purging them from society, or in some cases killing them. And so, witch hunts would try to get the accused witch to confess that they were guilty of the witchcraft or the murders or the disease that had swept the community. And then they would admit it, and then they would be summarily executed, right? So it's important to get the confession to justify the hysteria in the first place from the perspective of the persecuting mob. Okay? And so that's one of the things that you have to realize is still going on in this so-called cancel culture today, is they got to have you grovel and confess and admit that you're wrong for things you didn't do wrong. It's so important for them to try to coerce a confession of guilt out of their target's mouth. And in some cases, they would just write the guilt of the victim into the text after they were killed or purged. So they would just whitewash and write in that they were guilty, that they admitted they were guilty, even though they didn't actually confess it when they were alive. And that's what happens with contemporary history and newsmakers as they try to, news writers, as they try to, write in guilt into their targets of cancellation when it's not actually been confessed. But they are even more vicious and aggressive to those who confess and say they're guilty and say sorry. They get purged and banned even faster. So that's a very true point, is to not apologize to a mob. If you haven't done anything wrong except have a different opinion, you don't have to apologize for that. You're a human being. You have dignity. Mobs don't determine your dignity. They might be able to inflict temporary pain and shame on you, but they don't determine your value, your worth, and what you're allowed to think. They don't own your body. They don't own your mind. They don't own the universe. They're just a stupefied mob. We've seen them. They're a dime a dozen in history, and they represent the worst of humanity. So yeah, cancel culture is all about mob passions, about mob hysteria and arrogance, and it should be totally, avoided. We should totally shun it. The commenter said we should shame this stuff out of our culture. We should. But in order to do so, we have to have some good art, because you can't just tell someone, no, don't do that. Remember, I've told you this before. When Jesus confronted the mob that was trying to cancel the woman's life because of adultery, right? They were going to stone her. He doesn't tell them, you cannot stone her, right? Because if you tell them that, they're going to double down in the prohibition and do it even more. It's like a hot stove syndrome, right? So you can't tell a hysterical mob, do not do that. That's reacting, right? That's what conservatives tend to do. They just react. So someone says, we're going to do this. And then conservatives will say, oh, we'll just react and say, don't do that or something, right? That's not how you lead. So Jesus is a leader. So what he does is he avoids his eye contact with them so that they can't project their guilt and their hate into his eyes. So he deflects and makes himself small to avoid that, primal animalistic desire to one up one another. And he says, he who is without sin cast the first stone, which is a statement of affirmation. Go ahead and cast the first stone as you wanted, but he puts in a modifier at the beginning of it to say, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And that provokes a question in the members of the crowd who say, oh, well, now I have to be responsible for the stone that's in my hand, because I don't know if he's going to go first, or is Bob going to go first? Is Bill going to go first? Is Sam going to go first? And once you do that, now you're thinking of personhood. Now you're thinking of your individual responsibility for the violence. And so that's why it's important to use that kind of tactic, not thou shalt not. Thou shalt not will usually provoke a hot stove effect where people want to double down in doing their canceling or self-righteous behavior, okay? So you want to look at Jesus and apply that to so many of the moments of our culture today, and you will find that it's the way you lead people out of it. So that's why I say do art, right? Because Jesus gets them to ask the question. And that's what good art does. Whether you make a good film or a good podcast or a good Facebook post or whatever, you make good art, it makes people question and think. It provokes a question. You don't even have to ask a question. Just say something or do something, or, make a statement with your actions that gets people to ask those questions. Like, who is going to cast the first stone? And that breaks up the groupthink frequency that people get stuck in. We'll take a break and return with more live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski. As we look at more stories together, I want to look at this story here. Speaking of cancel culture, Mediaite reports that Facebook is set to decide whether Trump will be allowed back on the platform. So the Facebook's page this week, May the 5th, 2021, at approximately 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the Facebook Oversight Board will make its proclamation from on high. I mean, this is ridiculous. These people, they're just trying to stay relevant, trying to stay like they're the gods of publishing, and it's just they only have that power because of entrenched momentum from years past, before they did a switcheroo and stopped acting like a message board and started acting like a publisher with very, very wrong, bigoted biases. So it'll be interesting to see. In some ways, it may hurt Trump's brand to come back on there, don't you think? Because it's kind of like a little kid being allowed back in, like a chastened child, right? And his whole brand is all about being the guy who will say whatever he wants and doesn't mince words. And he's not going to stop saying that he doesn't like the practices that happened with the election, right? And so what are they going to do? Ban him right after he gets back on? Or is he going to moderate a speech, which people will see that as being disciplined and defanged? So in some ways, his brand, I think at this stage, may be better for him to refuse to continue posting on Facebook, so that, that's his brand of being the guy that says whatever he wants to say and doesn't back down one bit. So we'll see what happens with that, and whether they even, decide that they want to let their boogeyman back in. He's so important for a lot of people's sense of reality to have that boogeyman. Pete says, compared to the miracle of Apollonius, he's referring to the description of Jesus saving the woman who was going to be canceled by the mob for accusations of adultery. And he's referring to Apollonius, who is a pagan miracle worker a little bit after Jesus' time, who does the opposite. Instead of using nonviolence to save the victim from the mob, he triggers a mob into stoning a beggar to try to avert the chaos of the social order of tension, right? So he's performing a scapegoat mechanism, which is very in keeping with cancel culture. Apollonius represents cancel culture. Apollonius, nothing new under the sun. Apollonius and all the thousands of years before him have been, whipping up crowds to attack those who are considered misfit or contrarian or privileged or whatever it is. Whatever accusation that can stick on a stupefied crowd has always been the standard operating procedure of the ancient and archaic world. And so Apollonius is just a great example of that. And we would be foolish to not study anthropology and history so that we can see these patterns that are informing cancel culture behavior, McWoke behavior, and be a little bit more intentional about how we deal with and address these things. And finally, I want to give another little story to you about the dangers of seed oils. This is in the Collegian, which is Hillsdale's publication, The Evil Oils Inside Your Food, the science behind canola and vegetable oils. And it says, according to Harvard expert Guy Crosby, soybean, canola, palm, and corn oil are the top 4 vegetables consumed by the United States. These oils are referred to as refined, bleached, deodorized oils, RBD, which describes the process by which they are manufactured. And they aren't just in your curly fries. They're in everything from bread to pre-cooked chicken, as well as desserts and snacks. Even many avowed health products like protein powder are produced with one or more of these oils. In the 50 years since canola oil was invented by Canadian scientists by genetically modifying the rapeseed plant to be edible by human beings, the product has been touted for its health benefits. This is due to its low saturated fat content. Saturated fats are what most nutritionists consider the bad fats, which is not true, of course, because they have been shown to increase overall cholesterol levels, especially LDL, the bad cholesterol. While naturally occurring fats like butter contain 7.2 grams of saturated fat per tablespoon, canola boasts a mere 1.7. For this reason, among others, many manufacturers who hadn't already switched to canola and other GMO oils have good reason to do it in 1990, when the FDA required nutrition labels on all packaged and sold food. With its low percentage of saturated fats, canola oil appeared to be healthier. Yet canola and other genetically produced oils have been connected to long-term ailments, which the FDA-approved label doesn't show, according to some nutritionists. Catherine Shanahan, author of Deep Nutrition, argues that the modern diet is the real root cause of many of the diseases we believe are incurable, including cancer. Among other diet recommendations, Shanahan advocates cutting all vegetable oils and most sugar from your diet. While there are low in saturated fat, Shanahan explains that vegetable oils contain mostly heat-sensitive polyunsaturated fats. When heated, these fragile fats turn into toxic compounds, including trans fats. Since vegetable oils are most often used in frying, baking, and cooking, the touted low saturated fat option is not what it says on the tin. Cooking with vegetable oil destroys complex nutrients in the foods you cook with it. Vegetables, when cooked in canola oil, lose many of the vitamins and antioxidants they usually carry. Moreover, cooking vegetable oils creates thousands of free radicals. Chemists call this series of reactions a free radical cascade, Shanahan says. Free radical cascades damage normal polyunsaturated fats, turning them into ugly molecular gulls. Just like megatrans in the bottle of canola oil can become a lot of megatrans after you or the cereal, donut, frozen dinner manufacturers cook with it. These free radical cascades harden arteries and damage other bodily tissues, generating inflammation and interfering with normal metabolic function. So, I mean, this is stuff that we've talked about in different ways, but, you know, there's other stuff in this article says the result of consuming these oils range from acne to cancer to birth defects, clogged arteries, and even erectile dysfunction. So, you know, this is stuff that you guys need to know about. You need to get informed about. We all need to get these seed oils out of our diets and demand products that are not laced with this stuff, including our chicken and other animal products. They should be fed a natural diet, not a seed oil heavy diet. So that's it for A Neighbor's Choice today, folks. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Go to our website, aneighborschoice.com. But for now, Godspeed.